So in this video we're going to look at Jitter Rigid, which is an update to the standard Jitter tool, and it's really useful for adding random variation at the component level. So in here I've got what's going to be a part of a fence, and if I just clone it to create my fence, so I've cloned that in a single mesh layer. So there's I've got all these disconnected pieces of geometry. Now you might model something like that, or you might be given a model that's like this. But the problem with it in its current state is it's too uniform. You know, there's no variation to that, so it doesn't look very real. So we want to add some variation to this. So now we go to the Jitter tool. See that the Jitter tool now has rigid translate, rigid rotate, and rigid scale options. So what that allows you to do, if you just click and drag in the viewport, you can see you get the default behavior, which is the standard Jitter tool, which actually moves the individual vertices. But now we can tell it to move things in a rigid fashion based on each disconnected piece of geometry, rotate things, and also scale things. So that was a bit exaggerated. So if I just add a little bit of variation and then just add that in, you can see we get some really nice subtle variation very, very easily. So here's another example. I've got a gear here. If I duplicate that, let's just have 9. There we go. So what I want to do is kind of scale these randomly and also rotate them randomly. So if I go to Jitter, this situation, it's kind of like a two-stage process. So first thing I want to do is scale them. So I want to do rigid scale, and I only want to enable the X and the Y. So I can kind of scale them like that. And then if I want to rotate them, turn on rotate, and I only want to rotate it on the Z. Now what's nice about this is that it works based on selection, so if nothing is selected, then it treats each disconnected piece of geometry as the things to move. But if you do have something selected within the item, it'll treat each disconnected selection as the thing to move. So I want to create a curtain very quickly. I just select those polygons, run Jitter, leave it on Z and do a rigid translate, just click and drag. I very quickly got some nice variation in there in the starting point for a curtain. Now one thing about the Jitter tool is it always worked on UVs, and now that we've implemented this rigid translation of selections, it'll also work in the context of UVing as well, which is actually really, really useful. So in this situation with the fence where I've cloned a single piece of geometry, I've ended up with UVs stacked on top of each other. So if I add an image map to that, you can see we've added a variation to the actual geometry, but there's no variation to the application of the image at all. So it's all very uniform, almost tiled along those objects. But what we can do now, if we run Jitter in the UV window, we have an enable U and enable V, and we have the same rigid options as well. So to add some variation in here, let's start with like a rigid translate. When I turn that on, we get this locked stacked option, and it's turned on by default. I'm going to turn that off. And if I just click and drag in the viewport, you can see how it's varying the position of each UV island. So it's treating each UV island as a separate selection and randomly moving them. And now that texture looks a lot more random going across those objects. And then we can just do a fit in there.